You wake up after 8 hours of sleep. You turn off the alarm, sit up, and immediately feel like something is off. Physically, you've rested, but your mind still feels heavy. You pick up your phone for a moment. That moment quietly turns into 15 minutes. You stare at the screen, scrolling through messages, notifications, news. A familiar thought appears almost automatically. Why am I still this tired? Not sleepy, just exhausted. Later in the day, the feeling comes back. You sit down to reply to a simple email. Your fingers hover over the keyboard longer than usual. You read the message 3 times. It's not complicated, but your mind feels slow, like it's pushing through an invisible resistance. By the afternoon, small things start bothering you. A coworker asks a completely normal question. A friend invites you to hang out this weekend. Nothing is actually a big deal, but your brain reacts like each of these is adding weight to something already overloaded. Then the confusing part begins. You go to bed earlier that night, you sleep again, and the next morning, the exhaustion is still there. This is one of the most confusing experiences people have when they're burned out, because the obvious explanation no longer works. If you're tired, sleep should fix it. That's how physical fatigue works. You run a long distance, your muscles get sore, you sleep, your body recovers. But emotional exhaustion doesn't follow that rule. Psychologists have been studying burnout for decades and have consistently observed this pattern. Researchers like Christina Maslach describe burnout as something deeper than normal tiredness. It's not just that your body needs rest, it's your nervous system reacting to prolonged psychological pressure. And when that happens, sleep alone often cannot reset the system. You can see this in very ordinary moments of life. Imagine a familiar situation. It's Sunday evening. You've finished most of your work. You even had some time to relax over the weekend. But around 8 p.m., a quiet tension starts building. Your brain begins listing everything waiting for you on Monday. Messages to reply to, deadlines, meetings, small unfinished tasks. None of them are overwhelming on their own, but together they create a low, constant pressure in the background. Your body is sitting on the couch, but your nervous system has already started preparing for the next week. So when you finally go to sleep, your brain never fully powers down. Sleep happens, but recovery doesn't fully happen. Another place people notice this is after social interaction. You go out for dinner with friends, everything goes fine, but when you get home, instead of feeling recharged, you feel strangely drained. Your brain starts replaying parts of the conversation. Did I talk too much there? Was that joke a bit awkward? Did they seem slightly annoyed when I said that? Nothing actually went wrong, but the analysis continues. By the time you go to sleep, your mind has been running small background calculations for hours. Once again, sleep happens. But the system causing the exhaustion never really turned off. This is one of the hidden mechanisms behind burnout. Your brain is not just tired from doing things, it's tired from constantly processing things. Messages, expectations, social signals, responsibilities, future problems that haven't even happened yet. The human brain evolved to deal with threats. When it senses pressure with no clear endpoint, it keeps scanning, quietly, continuously, even when you're resting. Researchers who study chronic stress call this cognitive load. Your brain is carrying too many open loops at once, hundreds of small tabs left open in your mind. Think about how many things your brain tracks in a normal week. Conversations you should reply to, expectations from family, financial worries, health habits you feel guilty about skipping, messages you meant to answer yesterday. Your brain doesn't simply delete these, it holds them in a quiet monitoring system. Like dozens of apps running in the background of your phone, each one uses a little bit of energy, but together, they slowly drain your battery. That's why emotional exhaustion feels so confusing. From the outside, your life may not look extreme. You're still functioning. But internally, the system managing all those small pressures has never fully relaxed. And when that system runs for too long, something starts to shift. You begin reacting differently to normal situations. Small requests feel heavier. Simple tasks take longer to start. People you usually enjoy suddenly feel harder to engage with. Not because you don't like them, but because your mental energy budget is already in deficit. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional depletion. Your brain has spent so much energy managing pressure that very little is left for everyday interactions. And this leads to another pattern many people notice when burnout begins. You feel guilty when you rest. You finally sit down to relax. Maybe you open a show, scroll your phone, or lie down for a bit. But instead of real relief, a quiet thought keeps interrupting. I should be doing something productive. I still have things to finish. I'm wasting time. So even during rest, your mind stays slightly tense. And that tension quietly keeps the burnout cycle going. And that system is paying attention to something very specific. Not just how much you're working, but how much unfinished responsibility your brain believes it's carrying. Researchers studying attention have observed something called the Zeigarnik effect. The brain tends to hold on to unfinished tasks more strongly than completed ones. This is useful when you're trying to solve a real problem, but it becomes exhausting when dozens of small unfinished tasks pile up. Your brain never receives a clear signal that the day is truly over. Psychologists who study motivation have found that when mental energy drops, the brain becomes much more selective about where it spends effort. Even simple actions start to require negotiation. You can see this in small, everyday behaviors. You reread the same email 3 times before replying. You open a task, then close it again. You delay starting something that would normally take 10 minutes. Your brain isn't incapable. It's conserving energy because the system already feels overloaded. And when this continues long enough, another subtle shift begins to happen. Your emotional reactions become sharper. Someone interrupts you while you're working. Normally, you brush it off. Now, irritation appears instantly. A small inconvenience happens. Your reaction feels bigger than the situation. Not because you suddenly became less patient, but because emotional regulation also requires mental energy. When that energy is low, your brain becomes less tolerant of additional stress. The system simply doesn't have the capacity anymore. That's why burnout often shows up as 3 things at the same time: less patience, lower motivation, and constant fatigue. Not because your personality changed, but because your brain has been running in survival mode for too long. So the shift that actually helps people begin recovering from burnout often starts with something very small, but surprisingly powerful. Instead of trying to rest more, you start reducing the number of open loops your brain is carrying. One simple experiment you can try this week is this. At the end of the day, take 5 minutes to write down everything unfinished that your brain keeps reminding you about. Messages to reply to, tasks you're postponing, small responsibilities you keep holding in your head. Don't solve them yet. Just move them out of your head and onto paper. Research on cognitive load shows that when the brain knows a task has been captured externally, it reduces the need to keep tracking it. You're not removing the responsibility, you're removing the constant mental monitoring. Another practical adjustment relates to something many people with burnout struggle with: energy management. When your energy is low, you can't treat every activity the same. Instead of filling your schedule with things you should do, start noticing which activities actually restore your energy. For some people, socializing helps them recover. For others, quiet time does. Some people recharge through movement, others through slow activities like reading or cooking. Burnout recovery becomes much easier when your week includes a few moments that genuinely restore your energy. If this video helped you recognize something you've been feeling for a while, consider subscribing. This channel is about understanding the small psychological patterns that quietly shape everyday life. And if you've ever experienced that strange kind of exhaustion that sleep alone can't fix, share your experience in the comments. You might be surprised how many people recognize that feeling too.